Hello, everyone. This is another podcast episode of Mish Mash Men. Welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you with us today. Got an exciting topic to discuss. But first, let me introduce my sidekick. Actually, not my sidekick, my partner. I'm sorry. My partner.
Yikes.
my
assistant.
Dusty Labar.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed last week's episode. Dusty gave a good discussion on steroids in sports and also question of like fairness of pharmaceutical help.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, well researched.
And it might look like we just recorded these the same day, but oddly enough, we're out here the second week in a row.
In the same clothes.
But just because we like to be consistent,
and we enjoyed
2 weeks
it
at a time.
We enjoyed it. It was fun to be outside.
Well, we just slept in my Suburban
all week.
Yeah,
for 1 week straight.
Yeah.
We had movies. It was fine.
It was.
Yeah.
We just broadcast them on that.
Yeah, that's right.
So this week's episode is I'm going to start off with a quote. So the quote, and then we're going to talk about just in general where we're at. So the quote is, "All wish to possess knowledge, but few, comparatively speaking, are willing to pay the price." So everybody wants knowledge, but few are willing to make that sacrifice or pay the price for that knowledge. And I like quotes. I'm always busting out quotes here and there.
I do.
I post quotes quite a bit. In fact, I've got an Instagram channel where I read quotes.
Yeah, follow it.
Yes. Yeah, follow Stash of Wisdom and a YouTube channel. In fact, I'm going to add this because it's a pretty good quote. So why do I talk about that? Why did I use that quote? That quote is kind of tying in a lot of the things, not everything I've talked about, because I've had some other podcast episodes that I presented.
Right.
But this is kind of tying in a series of things that we've talked about the past few months.
Yeah.
So we talked about logic, the fallacies.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about biases, transcendent truth, how it's impossible to discern anything if there is no such thing as transcendent truth. Groupthink, mass formation, those are kind of tied together. The authority response with the Stanley Milgram experiments, and propaganda.
Which was a fun episode.
That was one of my favorites. So out of those, like anything that strikes a chord with you besides the propaganda one we just mentioned, but.
I mean, I think you did a good job. Maybe even you had told me a couple times that you were kind of working on some higher level stuff, like tying all these episodes together. So it's fun to talk about it now, how you can kind of tie all these things in together. Right. Even like seeing your list here that you've written. I mean, they all kind of tie in together and they're related. So if you literally could go back to the episodes, pick some of the ones that Adam went through and kind of see how they all mix together. They're kind of a thread,
if you will.
Thread, yeah. So, propaganda was fun because, there's a lot of topics within it that people already know, and it's like stuff that you can talk about. Like everybody knows about Nazi Germany, and like, people have feelings on the news today. So that's like a fun topic to talk about. I mean,
Sure.
I shouldn't say fun. It's
interesting.
It's an interesting topic to talk about now because so many people have heard it and know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
So.
And in general, like you mentioned, there's a common thread that I was working towards, and that common thread is just laying out a foundation so that when we talk about other things, and when you and I agreed to do this podcast together, we did not necessarily want to do a current events type thing.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it can't be topical to kind of in general what's going on today. And I think it's no secret that a lot of things that we tied together were about the events over the last several years.
Right. Yeah. A lot of those things, we can talk about the history. So I think one of the quotes that always like kind of, well, I don't know it's a quote. I don't know exactly what the quote is exactly, but like those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. Something along those lines.
So, I mean, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're talking about in general. Like we can use all these historical references, but like you can literally tie it into what's been happening the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Without a doubt, definitely the past 3.
Yeah, for sure. So it's an interesting thing to talk about now.
So, and along that line, there's a tendency for people to even when they get presented with information like what we talked about in the propaganda episode or the Stanley Milgram episodes, everyone always thinks, yeah, those people behaved that way, but there's no way.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do that. That wouldn't happen.
Yeah,
that wouldn't happen now.
That wouldn't happen now, or that wouldn't happen to me, or we're too smart, or we're too wise. And then that's not what history says.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So like, people often say like that, like that's crazy what happened in the past.
Right.
Like I'll just use an example, like the Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Like they're like, that's crazy, that could never happen again. I mean, it literally almost verbatim, where they were like, if you haven't been, like, people that haven't been vaccinated, when they come in the hospital, they should just die.
Right.
I mean, that's like almost verbatim what these people were saying.
Right. They're a separate class of people that
correct.
they don't deserve the same health care that the rest of us do.
That's not a comment on anything except for the fact that the people that were saying that, like, it's literally history repeating itself in a different avenue.
Right. It's frightening.
I mean, it's a little scary.
And it's frightening. I've always wondered, I know growing up you read what happened in Nazi Germany. That's a great example because it's very punctuated and acute, and we're fairly certain what happened by the time the end rolled around. But how did they get to that point? Like, how did Hitler and his cronies take over those people, and how did they do this, and how did they do that?
Slowly.
They did it slowly.
Yeah.
And it's very obvious now, like, how it happened.
Yeah.
It's no surprise now.
That's
right. And so anyway, it's frightening. But again, it's not a surprise because mob mentality is such that people gravitate towards a leader.
Yep.
And if that person whips them up into a fervor over a topic, they will get behind it and they will roll with it.
I think it can happen. We're not saying one thing specifically. It can happen in any direction.
Any direction at all.
It can happen in literally any direction. I mean, it just depends on the person and how charismatic they are and how they can get people, like, fired up for them. It's just people are naive. It's just funny to hear people say, like, that could never happen, and you're like, you would be like, yeah, how could that happen?
Yeah.
And then you watch it and you're like, oh, I get it.
Or people will say, like, oh, that would never happen in this country.
Yeah, well, that's right.
That gets said a lot about, okay, so this isn't on my notes, but this is a good topic. Good, nice little rabbit trail to illustrate what we're talking about.
Okay.
The Second Amendment. The Second Amendment restricts Congress from restricting arms to the people.
Right.
And just to take that a step further, the reason we had the Bill of Rights, I don't know if you knew this. I think we talked about this, and I think you do know this. But anyway, bottom line is, the reason we have the Bill of Rights is because there was a large disagreement between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists.
Right.
The Anti-Federalists, their kind of chief proponent, if you will, was Patrick Henry. He was a big Anti-Federalist, meaning we don't need a strong central federal government.
Right.
The states need to be in charge, and there needs to be a confederate and not a racist southern states, slaveholder states. It's a confederacy of states, not a United States with a strong central government. And so this was because the Anti-Federalists and their interesting papers that they wrote, and around the same time that the Federalist papers were being written. So they were just kind of going back and forth, producing things in newspapers, similar to the way we produce things in podcasts now.
Right.
And back and forth. And one of the reasons why the Federalist group said, okay, well, we'll have this Bill of Rights to kind of satisfy those urges to restrict the federal government from restricting speech, restricting arms, et cetera, et cetera. So back to the arms business. So we have now, because culturally we have been told, we have been taught, and we have been indoctrinated that guns are for hunting, they're for sport, but that's about it. Because what do you need arms for when you have this nice, strong government that's going to protect you?
Right.
That's not why the Second Amendment was there.
Right.
The Second Amendment is there to protect the people from a foreign power or an internal power that says, hey, you didn't pay your taxes, and they're 80%. You owe us taxes, otherwise we're going to take your house.
Right.
And the people rise up and say, no, enough of that.
Yeah, right.
So that's why there's a Second Amendment. Remember, the framers did not just finish going hunting, deer hunting, and then say, yeah, we need to still be able to hunt and catch our food.
Right. It was to literally protect us from the government.
They were, because the government was trying to take their arms, they said, enough of this.
Yeah.
The people need to be able to protect themselves.
Yeah.
So.
Because I think that happened in Canada.
It did.
Australia.
Yes.
Right.
It happens everywhere.
It's terrifying.
It happened in Nazi Germany. It happened in Russia. It happened in China.
Yeah.
As soon as they take the arms, then, and we did it to the Indians.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Wounded Knee.
Yeah.
Check that out.
Hey, give us your stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing bad will happen.
Nothing bad.
We promise.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I think most people think that what I think is what people think is that the Bill of Rights is giving you, that the government is saying you can have these rights.
Right.
But in actuality, our framers of our Constitution are saying this is your right to keep the government in check.
Right.
That it's not the government giving you the ability to do those things.
They call that negative liberties. So the negative liberties meaning the people have this right, the government has to stay out of this.
Right. Yep, that makes sense.
So anyway, back to it was a good discussion.
Yeah.
Really good discussion. So let me ask you this, and this is just food for thought, it's not a quiz. Let's discuss this. Are we a free people?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think some places are more free than other in the country, statewide, state-wise. I think you can probably guess which states are just generally they have are more freer than others.
That's fair.
So I think if you live in one of those states, you probably you feel more free, but you do have this sense I have this sense that the federal government is trying some like weird stuff to see what people will deal with and see what they can take away. So there's always that it's so important to have patriots that are willing to stand up and do the right thing. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because really one of the main things is freedom of speech right now.
Yeah.
So
in what way?
Well,
I agree with you, but in what way?
Well, so social media is a big thing right now, and news is a big thing, and all these. But social media specifically, it probably should be some kind of utility, like power, almost at this point, electricity, like everybody's allowed to do it.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
But what that means is there's going to be some people that say some wacky nonsense.
Right.
But they have to say it, and what stops those people is rational people. The government shouldn't stop them.
Right.
Rational people should stop them. So if somebody has a wacky idea, it's almost like a self-check with the rational people that are in the world or in our country. But they have to be allowed to say it.
What are your thoughts on hate speech?
It's a tricky thing. I think the outcome is what really matters. So just like I just said now, if somebody went on Twitter and said kill everybody that has a Suburban, right? And then the people, there's going to be wacky people that probably try to follow that. I don't have an answer for it. That guy's probably wrong. You probably shouldn't kill. Right. Everybody with a Suburban.
I have a right to stay alive.
Yeah, you have a right to stay alive.
And I have a Suburban.
So that person's in the wrong. And I think it's almost like the same thing. That's almost Charles Manson's defense. Hey man, I didn't kill anybody. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know the answer. I probably am not smart enough to know the answer, but I know that rational people are the answer to all speech that's improper. Rational people being able to speak out against those people, because irrational speech is decided by the people that are in power basically at that point. Mm-hmm. So at one point it was hey, anybody that says anything negative about the vaccine, we need to shut down.
Right.
But then you come to find out there's more data on it, and you're now everybody's just oh, but at one point they were let's stop them from talking.
Right, because it's hate speech.
Right, it's hate speech.
Yeah.
So we have to shut them down. So that's not right. Those people, it could be anything, man. Anything that's, in my opinion, anything that's, it just has to be those people will get berated by the rational, is what I really think. If somebody's saying something irrational, the rational will squash them.
So, in other words, society, individuals would say, hey, I heard what you said about those people that drive Suburbans, and I disagree, and I don't think, and just discuss it and ostracize that person, potentially. But ostracize in a sense that I'm not going to associate with Dustin anymore because he's got this crazy opinion.
Especially with social media, you'd be boom, unfollow. I don't have to listen to this nonsense.
Right, you don't have to listen to it.
I don't have to listen to this nonsense.
So, me personally, I do not think there is any such thing that the government should regulate quote-unquote hate speech. Yeah. Now, granted, there is hateful speech. There are nut jobs out there that say the craziest things. But that doesn't mean that the government should involve us in our business.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody gets somebody, it's weird. It's you can't if it's that fire in a theater thing just to say it.
Yeah.
That's not free speech to me. You're inciting something. Do you know what I mean? you're trying to get people injured, but like that's not a crazy person thing would be like kill everybody with Suburban.
Right.
But that person will get weeded out pretty quickly, in my opinion. If you let that person
just ignored,
talk, it will get ignored. They'll lose interest. They may have a couple people, but not enough to. Most rational people will be like, that doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't kill everybody that drives a Suburban.
And let me go further. So let's say that person that said kill all Suburban owners. That let's say they owned a bread baking shop.
Yeah.
Well, if you find out that this guy says that, and whether or not you're a Suburban owner, you might say, I don't want to do business with the guy because he's kind of a kook.
Yeah,
that's the end of it. You don't do business, and he will probably go out of business because of that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you say, we need to have a law, or I need to take him to court.
Yeah, right.
Because I think he is a nut job. Yeah, he's a nut job.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But who cares? Just ignore him.
Yeah,
He will go out of business, and the market will take care of him. Society will take care of him because he will be largely ignored, and
That's right.
and we'll move on.
That's really what I think too. Is society will weed out the people that are saying the crazy nonsense
Informally,
Yeah.
not we're not getting up torches.
No,
and
no,
stuff.
yeah, informally.
It's not
yes.
vigilantism, and it's
Yes.
not the government.
Right.
Definitely not. Those are my opinions, and it sounds like you have the same.
Yeah, the less governmental control, the better.
That's right, because the government that grants things and gives you things can take those things away, and we've seen that in the past.
That's right. That's fair.
So I'm going to talk about taxes next, and just in general, I think we're taxed too much.
Yeah.
I'm a Murray Rothbard fan, and if you have ever read Murray Rothbard, look him up. He is. I thought when I was younger that this guy's a fanatic, but now the more I read about him, I'm like, this guy. He's an economist. And I love economists.
Gotcha.
But his big thing is taxation is theft, and he's absolutely right. Taxation is legalized theft. The law says you have to pay these taxes. The law says I have to pay property taxes on my house.
Right.
So let's take that to its logical extension. Any tax, including let's just say property tax, if I don't pay it, men with guns show up and either take me away or make me pay. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%.
So am I really the owner of that house?
No, of course not.
Am I really the owner of the vehicle that I have to pay property taxes on if I just refuse to pay those taxes? Am I really the owner if the government says, well, we're going to come, men with guns are going to show up and take your property?
Yeah.
So it's not really my property. I'm a renter.
Yeah. Yeah, correct.
So I hate property taxes. I don't like any taxes, let alone, but there should be some things, some sort of use tax maybe on a road, or maybe privatize the roads and we pay for use.
Right.
But I am not a tax guy at all, because I think what the income tax ends up being is similar to, so we didn't have an income tax for the first half of this country. And then they got one for a little bit, I think in the late 1800s. Mm-hmm. I didn't research this, but this is just from memory. And then during the Progressive era, that's when things started going really crazy in this country, like Woodrow Wilson time frame. That's when a lot of the crazy amendments got passed. The income tax amendment, direct election of the senators, and we'll talk about that shortly. Instead of the senators being selected by the state senates, now they are elected by the citizens of that state, which is wrong. That's not the design of the country, and we could talk about that in another episode. But the income tax was one, and what it ends up being is they just withhold. They withhold all these taxes, so you just don't even pay attention. Rather than now, I got my tax bill, and you'd be fired up.
Yeah.
Let's vote this guy out because my taxes
are too high. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're paying roughly 33%, a third of our income goes out. Plus, we get taxed on purchases.
Yeah.
Plus, we get taxed on if I die. We get all that money gets taxed repeatedly over and over again.
Yeah, it really the funniest one that everybody can relate to is when people start talking about winning the lottery.
Yeah,
it's like the government just gets 40% of it.
It's a poor people tax, is what the lottery is.
It's so funny because you're like, the government's like, well, I get 40% of that. You're like, why? Like, because I want it.
Because we said that you could have a lottery.
Because we know you guys put all the money into it.
Yeah.
And you bought all the tickets, but we get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get almost as much as you.
It's a tax on the poor. Because generally speaking, that's who plays the lottery.
That's right.
Poor.
That's fair.
So taxes. Let's talk about the recent. I'm going to choose my words wisely because we want to make sure that we don't get. We're not monetized yet, but
it could happen.
It could happen if we get enough listeners and subscribers.
Yes, we could be monetized.
But in recent years, there were decisions made by the state, local, and federal government about, specifically the state and local governments, about what businesses could be open during a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
And we were told, you should probably stay in your house. We need to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
Because it's for your own good.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but just keep in mind that episode on propaganda. So why is the government saying who can be open or not? And how did we get to that point where the government can say, this business has to close?
Yeah.
How did we get there?
Yeah, that's all 100% that they tie it into. We're doing this in your best interest.
Yeah, for your good.
We have to do this to keep you guys safe. Whereas the opposite argument is, if I'm afraid to get sick, then I probably should. That's my decision. I should probably not go out.
1,000%.
So that's always that's what it should be in general. Anyway, if you go out, and it happens it literally happens every year, and if you go out during flu season, you're taking the chance that you're going to get the flu.
Right.
So you are making a conscious decision. It could be a virus that kills 99.9% of the people, and the only way to stay safe is stay inside. Well, if somebody wants to still go out, they should be allowed to do it. If they're like that 0.01% chance, I'm willing to take it.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up the flu, because it's funny how, if you've ever looked at the numbers, the 1 year there was hardly any flu cases was the year that we were all stuck in our houses. I wonder why that was.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's also, they just weren't even, I mean, that was a nonsense year. They were just like, hey, did you guys know the flu is down?
Hey, here's something else. The guy that invented the PCR test, Dr. Kerry Mullis, like a medical doctor, PhD type, he invented the PCR test. He literally said, this is not to determine whether or not someone's sick, because if you run it through enough cycles, you can find enough stuff to say anybody's sick.
Yeah, right.
And so, by golly, everybody that took the PCR test, they were sick.
They even said it couldn't differentiate between the flu and
it can't.
You have some kind of thing.
And on our government's health website, I won't say which one, it literally said, this is why I didn't get the shot.
Yeah.
It literally said, well, if you come positive on this type of test or the PCR test, it could be any type of, that type of virus that is associated with a cold. It means surrounding, CORONA.
Oh, gotcha.
That I'm speaking in code.
Yeah.
So that type of virus, it could be any number of one of those.
Yeah,
so you could have just like the common cold, or you could have another version of a cold, or yet another version of cold. So
sure.
I'm not saying it was made up, but I didn't do anything different than what I normally do, and
you're good.
I'm good to go.
Still good.
So at any rate, not that this episode is about that, but just trying to tie up some loose ends, because what I encourage everyone to do, remember, if you wish to possess knowledge, you have to pay a price, and that price is you've got to study. You've got to research things. You've got to try to figure things out yourself. And just because you're not a medical doctor, that doesn't mean that you cannot understand simple concepts.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, so there's that. Form of government. That's another topic that trying to thread some needles, and we're going to thread it all together towards the end. So it's been beat into our heads. I must have heard it 1,000 times in the past year that, hey, we need to protect our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Are we in a democracy?
Or a representative democracy?
Close.
Yeah.
I would call it a republic.
A republic.
Because that's the exact term of it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So republic. And in fact, it's a different type of republic than like the Roman Republic. This is a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy. I'm not saying it's the opposite of a democracy.
Yeah, because a democracy would be we all vote on everything.
We vote on everything.
All the people.
Yeah.
All the people in the country vote on everything, every issue.
And the framers knew that democracies end up in mob rule because it doesn't protect the individual at all.
Right, I gotcha.
The tyranny of the majority is the thing that rules, and you have to watch out for the way you guard against that is through the constitutional republic.
Right.
Benjamin Franklin has a great quote about that. Democracy is two wolves deciding, if you have two wolves and a sheep, the two wolves deciding what to have for dinner.
Gotcha.
And that's exactly what it is. The sheep is out. Like, he doesn't get a vote because he's outvoted.
Right. That makes sense.
So we need to guard against that. You need to teach your children, if you've got children, about what kind of government we have, why they picked the government that our framers did. and the values in it. I mean, there's a reason why they chose this form of government, and there's a reason why we're the longest standing. We have the longest standing constitution of any nation on earth.
Right.
The Brits have one of the longest standing governments.
Right.
But it's a monarchy, and it's
a cool guy.
That was cool.
Yeah.
But it is, and they have a kind of sort of constitution, but it's whatever the royalties say.
Right.
it is.
Right.
So it doesn't really count. So we have the longest standing constitution of any nation on earth. And I'd like to keep it that way because we know it works, and there were some very wise men that made up
That's right.
that document. So let me transition a little bit, and I'm going to ask some questions here, and you can read them all. But let's think about some of those topics: logic, truth, the cognitive biases, groupthink, mass formation, authority response, and propaganda, and how it ties into those. So what would a tyrant do if they wanted to get or retain power? Let's just say retain power. That makes it simpler. So what would they do?
Well, I mean, we have a lot of examples throughout history. So one would be, obviously with the propaganda, is to give people a story or narrative of what's going on. A narrative that they want the people to understand.
That they can believe in, get behind, and trust.
I guess that's probably one of the most important things. Because once you get those people behind you, like then it's becomes some of these things that we talked about, like groupthink and mass formation. Like if you get enough people behind you and they believe the propaganda you're spewing out, it's way easier to keep control of those people over the long term.
And I would say 100%. You're right that what they want to do is. It's harder to maintain control if you've got to use the force of arms 100% of the time.
Right, correct.
So if you're a tyrant and you have this armed constabulary that's going to run around and and minders to make sure that everybody's doing what they have to do in order for you to remain in power, that's hard work.
Yeah.
And you always have to worry about that guy that's protecting you turns the gun on you.
Right, correct.
You, the tyrant. So the best thing to do is set up a system where, unbeknownst to the people, that they're under a tyrannical control, and they don't even know it.
Yeah, the people are basically policing themselves under your rule.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like there are a lot of books that people have brought up in the past several years, but 1984 is one, and Brave New World is another. And what's the one by Ray Bradbury? Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah.
Burn the books.
Yes, burn the books. So I would, if I were to pick one of those three as like what is the most dangerous and insidious and the most similar to what we might have been seeing the past several years, it's A Brave New World. Because it's all about shaping people's thinking to where they desire to be led by this tyrant.
Right.
They fear the independent thinking. And it's just an interesting thought experiment. I have purpose to reread that book. I haven't, because I keep finding these other books to read, but what I need to do is reread it, because it's been 15, 20 years since I've read it, but it's a really good book. But another thing they do, besides, through that control, they try to distract.
Right.
They sell fear, they push fear, because it needs to be us versus them. When you look at Stalin, when you look at Nazi Germany, when you look at Pol Pot, when you look at Mao, it's all about creating fear so that the people fear them more than you as the tyrant.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And they do that through propaganda to shape the thinking. Right. And we know that we're all suspect to be to conform to propaganda, to to buy into it.
Right.
It seems like there's no way I would buy that propaganda.
Right.
But I mean,
except the one that aliens are real. That's real.
We need to do a dedicated episode on that.
I would love to.
You say aliens, I say demons, but that's a whole
flat Earth, all that kind of good stuff.
I don't say flat Earth.
Yeah.
So they try to shape thinking. They do it through schooling. They do it through. They also do it through. When you look at the tyrants of history, they try to denigrate the family. They denigrate fatherhood. They denigrate any kind of belief in anything other than them.
Right, makes sense.
In fact, the Communist Manifesto, that's one of the things that they purposed to do was to, they purposed to export this everywhere, including America, which is we need to crush the family.
Yeah.
We need to crush fatherhood. That's how you crush the family.
Yeah.
and you need to remove their faith in God and in the transcendent, all of that stuff, because then the state becomes God.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep. In a bad way.
In a very bad way.
Yeah.
So we can observe that kind of stuff, and what I'm asking you, the listener, to do is to consider all those kinds of things based off of the I wouldn't say the discussions that we've had in the past. To like, hey, why don't you study this area over here? Why don't you study propaganda?
Yeah.
Because the last thing we want to do is be asleep at the wheel.
Correct.
And we don't want to be like the group or the people in Brave New World, where they willingly succumb to the tyrant,
Right.
In order to make an easier life.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That makes sense.
So I'm gonna close with a quote, and we might have a little discussion after that. I'm gonna try to do better at some kind of closure rather than just stop talking. So there's another quote: "Give them bread and circuses, and the people will never revolt." So that was actually the same guy that wrote that first quote: "All wish to possess knowledge, but few, comparatively speaking, are willing to pay the price." He also said that last quote. So that was actually the same guy that wrote that first quote: "All wish to possess knowledge, but few, comparatively speaking, are willing to pay the price." He also said that last quote. So I'll ask you, what do you think that means?
Well, I think it means if you give the people, I guess I'm trying. What is the easy way to say this? If you give people just enough to get by and distract them, that they won't ever think to go against you because they think their life is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
So in fact, so Juvenal was he wrote satire.
Okay.
He wrote a bunch of satire, and there's a lot of great quotes from him. The satirists, there's a lot of great guys that wrote satire out there. Him, Jonathan Swift, another great satirist that wrote Gulliver's Travels.
Okay. Yeah.
And they were thinly veiled descriptions of what they saw in reality. They were just writing satire about what they observed, and they hid it behind this other allegorical tale to inform the public about something. So what he was saying was, just like in Brave New World, if the people are well fed and they are easily distracted with the circuses in this case, they're never going to revolt. So it's just like Brave New World.
Yep. It's like the $1,400 in Tiger King
Yeah.
that they gave us.
Yes. Yeah, we got a lot of money,
Yeah.
and we had Tiger King. It's
Yeah.
funny how like we were easily entertained, and we had plenty of food.
Yep, plenty of food.
And fear of. Did you ever see Monty Python's The Holy Grail?
Of course, yeah.
Bring out your dead.
Yeah, bring out your dead.
You know, I was kind of waiting for those carts to come around during the whole response in 2019, 2020. Like, where's the carts?
Yeah.
I don't see anybody because my kids were out playing in it, and we didn't care. I was just going wherever.
The same way.
Like when is this going to happen? Because I'm not doing anything to flatten that curve.
Yeah.
And nothing's happening.
Yeah. If anything, I'm rising the curve.
So I encourage you, listeners, take a look at history. Take a look at some of the things that we talked about. Do your own research. And I know that sometimes sounds like what crazy nutjob conspiracy theorists say. But you got to look at what history has told us, and what history tells us is tyrants will do all those things to us that we were describing here, and a whole lot more, because to hold you at a point of gun takes a whole lot more effort and a whole lot more work.
Yeah.
So that's all I have on that topic, Dusty. I don't know.
Super fun.
I don't know if you've got any questions, comments, or.
That was very entertaining for me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed tying everything together.
I hope we tied it together.
Yeah, I feel like we tied it together in a nice little tight knot. A super tight knot.
With a bow?
With a bow. Yep. That some would say with a bow.
Yeah, I would say with a bow.
Bow line, possibly. But no, I appreciate that. That was really well thought out, and we did get to tie all those episodes together. So hopefully you guys like the Star Wars movies can go back and listen to these in order and see how Adam ties them together.
Yeah. I appreciate that. It was an enjoyable conversation.
Yeah, it was fun.
And I guess you recognize my bowline up here on my. That's why you use bowline?
That's exactly why I said that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So be with us next week. We'll be doing a couple more episodes until we get cut off.
We may be inside.
Yeah, I hope
We'll
we're
see.
inside.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, this was fun. And now that the shade is on us, it is much better. And
Yeah.
we learned to arrange our seats so it's like a saddle,
Yeah, it's much better.
much more comfortable, and fewer ants. So stay with us. We'll be with you again next week, and I'll have a great day.
Bye, guys.